Greetings, I guess, on this edition of Vibrations is Georgia State Senator Julian Bond. Brother Bond, welcome to Vibrations.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Brother Bond, first of all, what are some of the roles and responsibilities associated with being a state senator?
Well, in the most general kind of way, they are supporting things that are helpful to your constituents and opposing things that are harmful to them. Because there are only 2 black senators in Georgia, 21 blacks in the House, we have taken on the responsibility of trying to represent all of the black people in the state of Georgia, including those who are ill represented by white state senators and white representatives. It's a very difficult task. Politics is many, many different things. It's the art of the compromise, the art of the possible. It's a process by which you try to get the whole loaf and sometimes have to settle for only half. We try as best we can to deliver to the people who've elected us and sent us to the state capitol in Atlanta. Sometimes we do and sometimes we don't.
There's been a recent revitalization or reemergence of the Klan in the state of Georgia and probably nationwide. Do you feel that there will also be a reemergence of organizations like SNCC?
I don't know. I think SNCC, unlike the Klan, existed because a need for it existed in a peculiar way at that time in the early and middle 1960s. The Klan, of course, is much older, has a longer history, longer tradition. It was here before the more modern-day civil rights organizations came along and is here after some of them gone. Any organization like that, like the Klan, which appeals to people's baser instincts, is always going to find some audience in the general population. There are always a group of perverse people, sick people, ill people, who thrive on that kind of operation, who like to dress up in funny costumes. I've concluded that one of the reasons they wear these funny pointed hats is to make up for very real physical inadequacies elsewhere in their bodies. So that's why they'll be around for a long time, I'm afraid.
Well, hopefully the pathological.
Another blow against the progress made so far is being organized by a curious collection of some old friends and some old enemies who have come together to mount a legal challenge to the affirmative action and equal opportunity program that all too slowly and all too cautiously are finally beginning now to provide some compensation to the victims of a 200-year-old racially motivated quota system, which is guaranteed that only the male and the paid will have a monopoly on good jobs, on seats in colleges and universities, on positions of power and prestige in government, on all of the benefits and rewards that the United States of America promises the many, but delivers only to the few. If the Supreme Court of the United States upholds the California court in the Bakke case, the most immediate and frightening effect will be a serious lowering of the quality of health care available to the residents of the state of California. Remember, as this discussion goes on around you, that Alan Bakke applied to 13 medical schools, and 13 schools turned him down. One of them twice, and one included his alma mater, which presumably knew more about his qualifications or lack of them to be a doctor than any other school in the world. Remember that 2 of the schools that turned...
Brother Bond, I would think that the individual bias in America be dealt with rather easily, but how can we make a change in institutional racism?
Well, it sounds corny to say, but you got to find some way to control people's private action to, in effect, affect their hearts and their minds. President Eisenhower used to be fond of saying that you can't legislate men's minds, but you can legislate their behavior and the things they do. And it's men who create these institutions, not the institutions themselves. We've got to discover a way to infiltrate them with ourselves, to get into them, to take part in them, whether it's government or an educational institution or some financial corporation, so that we are at least some of the levers of decision, so that we pull some of the strings that make things happen. We've got to increase our political strength, our economic strength, our educational abilities. We've got to just do all of the things that we've tried to do over the last 200 years, only do them harder, longer, stronger, and better.
Brother Bond, I think that you would agree that the situation for black people in America is not as good as it could be. I guess some of the solutions to some of the problems that you would see would tend to be described as socialistic. Would that be an adequate description of free health care and things like that?
Well, not really. I guess it is to some people, but you have to remember when Social Security was first proposed, people said this is creeping socialism. We'll be a communist country in 2 years. Now, of course, Social Security is an accepted part of the American economy, an accepted part of the American way of life. In fact, if it weren't for the Social Security system, Florida wouldn't have any population. They wouldn't have all these very fine retirees who live in this section of the United States. Every time there's been some suggestion of human progress made, its enemies have tried to discredit it by calling it names, and socialistic and socialism, communistic, those are bad words in America. But there's nothing wrong with providing free health care to everyone. It's done in Canada, it's done in Great Britain, it's done in other industrial democracies like ours. In fact, we're one of the few that doesn't have an effective system of national health care. So if anything, we're anachronistic, we're behind the times. It's about time we began to catch up.
According to some of the television stations,
among the goals we ought to pursue are the following: income and wealth redistribution through a tax structure that reduces the disparity between the needy and the greedy. The beginning of the end of poverty through a program of real full employment, supplemented by negative income tax for workers earning on the margin. A system of total lifelong education that would dignify vocational as well as academic training and permit each of us to realize full potential. Free, adequate, cradle-to-the-grave health care for all Americans, supported by the national treasury and not by profit-making insurance companies. Effective social control of monopoly and national, regional, or municipal ownership of vital services operated for need and not for profit. These hold out the promise of no perfect world, but do hold out the hope that we may create a system of laws and relationships between us that promise more than the present system of privilege for only a few. What we need be about in 1978 and for many, many, many years to come is the creation of a national coalition of need, of parents who want care, not just warehousing for their children, of workers who want work at a decent and protected wage, of all those who want an end to subsidy and socialism for the rich and welfare and capitalism for the poor, of all those who must learn that...
Senator Bond, I'm curious to find out your plans for your political future. On Capitol Hill, we have Representative Barbara Jordan stepping down. It's been rumored that Representative Augustus Hawkins will not run for re-election. Also, Representative Burke from California. With the decline in the number of members of the Congressional Black Caucus, that would severely weaken their influence and their clout. Do you have your eyes set on a seat in Capitol Hill?
No, I don't, but somebody black will replace Miss Jordan, someone black will replace Miss Burke, somebody black will replace Congressman Hawkins, and in time, someone black is going to be elected to the seat Andrew Young used to hold. So the numbers probably won't get any smaller, and they may, in fact, even get larger. But as for myself, I don't know what my future is going to be. I'm trying now to decide what it is I want to do for the next few years. I've been in the state legislature in Georgia for almost 13 years now. And that's a pretty long time. I'm not so conceited to think I'm the only person who can do what I do. I think there are many, many others who can do it, some younger than I. And the time may come when I need to move aside and give somebody else a chance.
Reverend Jesse Jackson recently addressed again.
It is beside the point to ask whether we form a real race. Biologically, we are mingled of all conceivable elements. But race is psychology, not biology. And psychologically, we are a unified race, with one memory, one red history, and one revolt. It is not ours to argue whether we ought to be segregated or whether we ought to be a caste. We are segregated. We are a caste. Our problem is this: How far and in what way can we consciously and scientifically guide our future so as to ensure our physical survival, our spiritual freedom, and our social growth? Either we do this or we die. There is no alternative.
Do you foresee a swing in the pendulum from black supporting Democratic candidates over to Republican conservative viewpoints?
Well, there are a large number of counter-conservative black people. There used to be fairly heavy black participation in the Republican Party, and it's interesting to remember that between 1968 and 1972, Richard Nixon increased his share of the black vote by 100%. One frightening result of what Reverend Jackson had to say, and I think what he had to say was very well taken, that we shouldn't be the slaves of any one party, is that I've met a number of young black people who don't care anything about Democrats or Republicans, but just say, hey, the Republicans have some dough, so I'm going to be a Republican. And that's frightening to me. It shows a complete lack of understanding of the political process and the worst kind of opportunism. So I'd be very much afraid that in addition to some sincere, dedicated, concerned black Republicans, whose opinions would be very different from mine, we're also going to have a group of people who are just going to say, well, if I become a Democrat, I'm going to have to work my way up the ladder. If I join the Republicans, I can start at the top and they'll give me some money too. Those are the kinds of people we have to watch out for. They're not Republicans, they're not Democrats, they really belong to the I've Got Mine party.
A lot of people seem to feel that there's the faith in the Democrats has subsided. Do you feel the Republicans can affect the change what blacks have historically relied upon Democrats to do?
Not really. The solutions the Republicans propose to the problems we have are not, in my view, solutions that are going to work. The Democrat solutions have obviously not worked as well as they should, but for the moment, if you only have those two parties to choose between, I think the mass of black people are still going to stick with the Democratic Party, as pathetic as it may be.
Another issue.
If America proposed the murder of our group, its moral descent into imbecility and crime, its utter loss of manhood, self-assertion, and courage, the sooner we realize this, the better. By that great line of McKay, if we must die, let it not be like hogs. But the alternative of not dying like hogs is not that of dying and killing like snarling dogs. It is rather conquering the world by thought, by brain, and by plan, by expression and organized cultural ideal. Therefore, let us not beat futile wings into impotent frenzy, but let us carefully plan and guide our segregated lives, organize in industry and politics to protect it and defend it. What will be, no one knows. It may be a great physical segregation of the world along the color line. It may be an economic rebirth, which ensures spiritual and group integrity amid physical diversity. It may be utter annihilation of race and class and color barriers into one ultimate mankind, differentiated by talent, susceptibility, and gift. But any of these ends are matters of long centuries and not years. You live in years, swift, flying, transient years. You hold the possible future in your hands, not by wish or will, only by thought, plan, and organization. Thank you.